For mixed martial arts fans, Professional Fighters League is one of the fastest growing sports league in the world, and the league has a major event coming up later this month. Joining me to talk about it is the president of the PFL, Don Davis, and also combat sports play-by-play announcer, Karan Bhatia, and both men join me now. How's it going, guys?
Great to be here. Always good to talk fighting.
Yeah, always good.
Doing great, Dexter. Always a pleasure to join you.
Yes, sir. Always a pleasure to talk to you too, Karan. Don, pleasure to meet you here. And Don, I'm going to start with you. The PFL has grown significantly over the past few years, both in terms of audience and talent acquisition. Can you share how the league has evolved and what milestones are you most proud of since its inception?
Yeah, for those who don't know the Professional Fighters League, it's the only one in MMA that has a sports season format. So if you're a fan of the NFL or the NBA, it works the same. Regular season, playoff, and championship. You win, you advance, you lose, we see you next year. So think of it as March Madness meets MMA. It's a fighter-driven company, not a promoter-driven company. What happens inside the cage determines who fights next. You win 4 times, you win $1 million check and a very cool belt and become the champion each year. That's why the PFL has exploded in audience growth and fan popularity. It's transparent, it's meritocracy, it's like any other sport league.
I love it. I love to hear that. I love the transparency of it, and it makes it really exciting. Karan, I got this for you. The PFL, they've brought in some of the biggest stars at MMA, Francis Ngannou, Jake Paul. So how has the PFL positioned itself to attract such high-profile fighters, and what impact do these fighters have on the league's global growth?
Getting these huge names in PFL is absolutely huge, and it can't be understated. And that's a testament to Don Davis, the rest of the great team, Peter Murray, all the great folks at PFL. Now, the reason they were able to do that was because of a unique proposition to some of these fighters. So you look at a Francis Ngannou, who is going to be fighting on October 19th, and I know we're going to chat about that. But when Francis Ngannou entered the marketplace, he was the heavyweight champion of the world within UFC. So basically the baddest man on the planet in terms of MMA. He had a lot of different options and where to go. One of the things that was reported, and when you throw it back to Don, he can confirm or deny this, but part of it was Francis said, hey, not only do I want to get paid what I'm worth, which is very reasonable for a combat sports athlete of that caliber, but he said, I want my opponents to be paid at least $1 million, even up to $2 million. And so what PFL was able to do is say, hey, we understand that you want compensation to be fair across the board, and we can help with that. In addition, there was also the launch of the global expansion to things like PFL Africa. And Francis Ngannou can be an ambassador for things like that. So to answer your question, I believe the reason PFL has been able to succeed in getting these big names is because they're able to offer a bespoke offering and work with these fighters. Like Don said, it's about the fighter. And for so long, MMA and UFC had been synonymous. And UFC deserves that because of the product they built. But at the same time, if there's not a seat for you at the table, what do? You build a longer table. And that's what PFL has done. And now they're a big part of the conversation in mixed martial arts. And the global expansion is only just beginning.
Sounds great. Sounds like a way everybody can eat. Don, you just heard Karan talk about global expansion. So what is the PFL's global strategy moving forward? How do you plan to expand the league's international footprint, and what markets could you possibly be targeting next?
Yeah, he's absolutely right. There's room enough for 2 big players. There's 650 million MMA fans. That's the 3rd biggest fan base, trailing only soccer and basketball. But 80% of those 650 million are not here in the U.S., so it looks just like the soccer fan footprint. And remember, there's 8 soccer leagues. MLS, the one in the United States, is the smallest of the 8. So most of the fans of MMA and soccer are not here. What PFL is doing, very distinct from what UFC is doing. We are serving those fans, not just with a global product that we distribute to 170 countries like UFC does, but we're giving every region their own local product. So PFL Europe, PFL Mideast, and starting next year with Francis Ngannou as chairman, PFL Africa, their own local heroes, all prime time, their time, all events they can see in region. So think of it as we built the Champions League of MMA, to borrow a soccer term, where you start out locally, you become champion. When you become champion of Europe or Africa, you move to PFL Global. That's how we're serving the world.
Yeah, for a soccer fan like me, very easy to understand there, very efficient there, and you get to see the best facing off against the best. Karan, another one for you. How do you think PFL distinguishes itself from other MMA promotions, right? You mentioned UFC, you also have Bellator. How do they distinguish themselves both in terms of format and also fighter development?
Yeah, so PFL is obviously coming in a little bit as a disruptor in this space. We know for a long time UFC was the mainstay, and UFC deserves credit for everything they built. But PFL is trying some innovative new things. And if you watch a broadcast, you're going to see things like the smart cage, the ghost cam. You're going to see innovative graphics. You're going to see betting within the actual broadcast so that you can get tips on what to look out for. There's also the expansion into other regions like Don just touched upon. In addition, right, these fighters are warriors. We know that. And that's why it's so important to be respectful of all these fighters. And one thing that's important, obviously, to a lot of fighters is if you're putting your life on the line, you deserve to be compensated what you're worth. So one thing that PFL has done has offered $1 million prize in that tournament structure that Don alluded to. And I think as combat sports fans, that's really appealing to us because there's a pathway to success for your favorite fighter that you want to follow. It's not, hey, I'm linked with X promoter. Maybe X promoter will work with Y promoter. Maybe the fight will come together. There's a pathway there. And it sounds like the global expansion part is even more interesting because you could get bumped up from your league or your region into, let's say, the main league, main region. Maybe you could get relegated back. And it puts it back onto the fighting, right? That's what's most important. What do you do in the cage? So it's a testament to Don. If you don't know Don's backstory, he saw on the ticker one day long ago about UFC being sold, and he said, "Hey, this is ripe for disruption," and him and the team are doing so. So credit to them.
Yeah, it seems like PFL could be big disruptors here in this space. Don, you've got a big event coming up. It's the Battle of the Giants that's going down on October 19th. Features headliners, like we mentioned, Francis Ngannou, Cris Cyborg as well. Can you tell us what makes this event special, and what can fans expect to see on October 19th?
Well, the biggest fight in all of MMA this year is not from the leader, which is still UFC, but it's from Professional Fighters League. It's the best men's fight, Francis Ngannou. As we heard, when he left UFC, he was #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world and the undisputed heavyweight champion. It's his first time back in MMA after spending 2 years in boxing. And he goes against ESPN's #5 ranked and fastest rising star, according to ESPN, The Problem. 6'8", hardest puncher, most athletic. This is going to be the Predator's toughest test. And why is this also the best card? It's the #1 female fight in all of MMA this year. Cris Cyborg, who is the undisputed GOAT, 1 loss in 18 years, 4 promotion world champion, against 2-time PFL champion, and the only woman to beat the current woman's face of UFC, Kayla Harrison, Larissa Pachenko. So you've got Cyborg Pachenko, Ngannou Ferreira. What a co-main event. Battle of the Giants for sure, October 19th.
Well, hey, with all that, those are some definite giants there in the sport for sure. Should be a good one on October 19th. A couple more for you guys. Curran, when you have somebody like Jake Paul, right, who's got a massive following outside of combat sports, how does PFL balance the entertainment aspect with the core values of MMA competition? Because that's something that always has to be balanced in this sport is we see the popularity among certain fighters. How do they balance that?
In modern day combat sports, marketing is just as important as what you do when you're competing, because nowadays in 2024, right, you want to engage with your fans, right? You want to create a social media profile. You want to engage with fans. You want to let them follow your story. So I've been consistent about this, that Jake Paul coming into combat sports and other people from other walks of life, let's say YouTubers, influencers, is a good thing because they're bringing their audience into combat sports, and that's what we want, right? And so credit to Jake Paul for everything he's doing. Credit to Francis Ngannou. We even said credit to UFC for building up MMA to what it is now, and now PFL is coming in. And one differentiator that they're doing, which is advantageous to them, is they're also allowing flexibility. So what that means is Francis Ngannou can fight in PFL, but earlier this year he fought in boxing. Or Jake Paul is also trying his hand at boxing. Now he can try his hand at MMA. Plus, PFL also has its own stars, its own champions, even working with people like Muhammad Ali's grandson, Biagio Ali Walsh. So there's a lot of different fighters at a lot of different levels. The one thing to remember is, yes, there is sports marketing, sports entertainment fights, like, for example, a Jake Paul. Now, we know that is the highest level of entertainment and marketing. It's not necessarily the highest level of competition. If you want the highest level of competition, you tune into Francis Ngannou's fight. So PFL has a little bit of both. So it's important to know that both are there, both are important, both help with growing eyeballs. For example, Jake Paul hosting a press conference for Francis Ngannou. Now you bring in together both sets of audiences, and you can grow the sport that way. So I think that's the most important thing. Maintain a high level of competition at the top of the sport, and maintain a high level of entertainment, sports entertainment. Do both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It's an and you can do both, and PFL is doing that.
I think that's a good point, Kurt. I think a lot of times in combat sports, people think that it has to be one of the other. There's a way for both to work together, right? We can say that. Don, for you, I noticed this from looking at the PFL, their use of smart cage technology and AI-driven analytics, it's groundbreaking. So how has this innovation helped to enhance the sport of MMA, for both fans and also for fighters?
Yeah, most of my career is building disruptive consumer companies. So I start with the fan first or the consumer first. What would make the sport more engaging, more accessible, and more interesting to them? So we make a more modern and more engaging video product than anybody out there. So what we do, for example, is have AI scoring. Who actually won this round is displayed on the screen. So think of it as, what if you didn't have the yellow line for first down in football, or if you didn't have the pitch speed in baseball? It'd be far less interesting or easy to understand those sports. That's what the PFL does for MMA fans. For example, we have real-time changing odds every 30 seconds on the screen, taking all the betting feeds in. Everybody wants to talk about who won that round, but you never know until the judges' scores happen at halftime. So we now have two ways: AI scoring and real-time odds. We also have punch impact, kick speed, heart rate. So PFL is a more gamified and more modern viewing experience. That's resulted in 50% of our viewers are sports fans, but new to MMA. That's why ESPN's renewed us 3 times. That's why we have now 20 media agreements covering 170 countries around the world. We're making the tent bigger. Sports fans are coming into MMA like never before.
All right, seeing the growth there. And speaking of growth, got one more last thing for you, Don, especially in your role as president of PFL. I know as a president, you always want to look ahead. So when you look ahead, what is your long-term vision for PFL in terms of its place in the global sports landscape? Do you see it becoming the primary destination for MMA talent and also for fans worldwide?
Yeah, I would just leave 3 quick points. If we serve fighters and fans, we'll be a great and lasting company. It's all about fighters and fans. Number 2, this is not a winner-take-all market. MMA is a global sport. Most people think NFL and XFL. That's a United States viewpoint. This is a global sport with global streaming and a global athlete base. So it's a duopoly. It's now UFC and PFL at the highest level. They're the leader, but we're the fast-growing, disruptive incumbent coming right after them. And finally, number 3 is we're global, and we're premium, and we're just starting. We're in year 6. They're in year 30. So game on. If you're a fan, watch both. If you're a partner, check us out. This is going to be an interesting time for MMA growth, MMA evolution, MMA disruption with PFL.
All right, feels like an interesting time. Glad to have this conversation with both of you about this. I always talk a lot of combat sports with Curran. Pleasure to talk with you as well, Don. That is Don Davis. He is the president of Professional Fighters League. Check them out. Also, Curran Bhatia, combat sports play-by-play announcer, one of the best in the game. Guys, I appreciate this conversation. It was good, and I'm going to be checking out the battle that's going down on October 19th, which should be a really fun one, and we will talk again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
ESPN pay-per-view, 5 p.m. Saturday.
5 p.m. Saturday. Check that out. I know Curran's going to be tapped in. Check it out.
I'm going to check it out.